Welcome to today's episode of The Irresistible Factor. I'm really happy today to have another female founder. Her name is Whitney Lounsbury, and she is the founder of Butter Baked Cake Co. Welcome to the podcast, Whitney.
Hi there, Christy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to talk to you. So, I'd love to start with just a little bit of background about you and how you wound up founding a brand, and then I want to hear a lot about the brand itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my brand, similarly to a lot of the brands in the better for you space, was born out of a need that my own family had. My son, who was 5 at the time, was having some medical complications, and our family made a decision to change the way we eat to help support his health journey. And we made the difficult decision to cut out basically everything inflammatory from our diet. So sugar, gluten, grains, seed oils, and we kicked everything out of our pantry that we'd been eating. And I got to the kitchen and started making everything from scratch so that we would have delicious options. At the time, him being 5, he just started kindergarten and was going to a lot of birthday parties, as they do at that age. And I just couldn't stand the thought of him being the only one left out when the kids were having cupcakes. And so I was scrambling to find an option that he could eat that fulfilled all of those dietary needs that we were struggling with for our own family. And there just wasn't anything in the market. And so I had to come up with a recipe and something edible and delicious that a picky eater would eat. And so I made a lot of truly terrible test recipes in the kitchen and eventually landed on something really wonderful that even my kids didn't realize was healthy. And about 9 months later, I'd had my daughter already. She was still wrapped up in the papoose most of the time. I made the decision to bring it to the market.
So, what was the product? What was your first product that you launched with?
Yeah, we launched with the cupcakes initially. So baked goods has always been our bread
Yep.
and butter, so to speak. And I luckily started out small doing in-person events, community events.
And what were you doing before that?
Yeah, so my background is in sales and marketing. I lived in New York City for quite a few years and worked in the fashion industry. And so sales and marketing was something that always kind of came naturally to me. And food has always been a passion, and baking has always also come naturally to me. But baking keto, sugar-free, gluten-free, grain-free products is a different animal. I remember the first few test batches being surprised that they didn't turn out perfectly because I'd never experienced that before. I'd always had this knack for everything turning out in my baked goods, even if I didn't follow the recipes. So it was shocking when the first few were just so terrible. And
Mhm.
it was a blow to the ego. So when I finally nailed those recipes, it was exciting. And I say to people all the time, the ingredients that we use are expensive, and a lot of families want to do their own baking with these clean ingredients. But not only do they not have the time, but making it work is not easy. It's not the same as
Yeah.
even just gluten-free baking. It is exceptionally difficult to make it taste good.
Interesting. I'm curious, were you nervous to make the leap from fashion to this, or were you excited? Did anything that you learned in fashion apply? Because I mean, your site's beautiful, your brand is beautiful. I mean, you clearly have spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I think sometimes when people start brands and they're not brand people, they don't, but you have an interesting background that maybe led you there. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I definitely, the fashion industry luckily has given me a lot of background in aesthetics and also retail. I
Yeah.
was running a sales team selling into retail, which helped me with the perspective of not growing too quickly. I've seen a lot of fashion brands roll into many, many doors, like with
Yeah.
Macy's, and then regret it because those smaller stores at the end of their pipeline turn so slowly. And I don't want to get too wonky. I don't know how into the weeds your audience likes to hear, but those stores that are at the bottom of their pyramid, they sell so slowly, it drags down your velocity for your entire um, entire averages, and it makes your brand look like it's not performing. And
Yeah,
so management's looking at it, they think that you're not selling well, but in reality, it's just the bottom part
yeah,
of the store sets dragging down when you should just have not been in those stores in the beginning. So I've been really strategic in our rollout with retail, especially. Um, and a lot of that is because of that background in retail and making sure that we're in the right place, making sure that we've established that right foundation. So, yeah, I would say that it's helped me immensely, making sure that we understand who our customer is,
yeah,
because again, it doesn't matter if I think the product's amazing, it's totally irrelevant. What matters is that my customers resonate with it and they are um, motivated to talk about the brand and motivated to continue to purchase it, and that it's valuable to them and
mhm,
that it does something for their families, because it is a premium product. The ingredients are expensive, and so they have to be committed to what it does for them, both in taste and in value. And so we know that going in, it can look as pretty as we want, but they have to be the ones that see the value, not
yeah.
me.
It's
It
so
does that for me because I knew what it did for my family, but
yes, yes, yes. So you have experience with it, but I think that's a really important point, and I want to go back to your retailer comment in a second because I also think that's important. But I have been doing a lot of work with some brands recently, and I think the part about understanding who your consumer is and making sure your marketing, your product, your messaging is right for them and not necessarily for you or not necessarily for everyone is so important to talk about because you could get a million followers on Instagram. And if they're all people who have no shot or interest in your brand, but they came there because you made some really cool content, what good is that going to do you in the
yeah,
end?
yeah.
Yeah.
You want to niche down, niche down, niche down as much as possible. One of the ways that we found is effective for us is through our affiliate marketing
Mm-hmm.
to consumer, because we do ship nationwide. And because we are a keto product, our mission isn't to make everyone eat keto, but we want to make sure that we're providing a low carbohydrate clean ingredient option for
Yeah.
our customers. And it doesn't taste like a keto option though, so that's one nice thing. But because our affiliates can speak to that and their audience is already niched down, direct to consumer, that audience is online, mostly a gluten-free, sugar-free, low-carb audience. So they're
Yep.
niche down. It's a lookalike audience already to what
Yep.
our product is. We don't have to do a lot of education. So once they're in my ecosystem, they're highly motivated. They're very
Yeah.
much ambassadors for my brand, because once they taste it, they know that it tastes delicious. And it's hard to find delicious baked goods with this ingredient profile. And
Totally.
so at the grocery store, it is actually oftentimes a different customer, which is unusual for food brands, I find. So it can be the same customer, but because the education piece has to happen. At the store level, we find it's mostly from demos, a sugar-free, gluten-free customer. The keto component is a nice to have, but it's
Yeah.
not necessarily a need to have.
That's so interesting. So let's get to the retailer conversation. Oops, hang on. This thing doesn't seem to want to go away. I'm just going to let it in.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
I
That's
don't know
okay.
how to take it off. It's
That's
technology.
okay. It's no big deal. Um, oh goodness. Okay, it's gone. Now we're back to retailer. Okay, so let's talk about the retailer conversation. So you mentioned understanding retail from fashion and knowing that there are places where your brand doesn't belong or isn't going to do really, really well. How did you figure that out when it came to this brand? And then talk about the retailers that you're in and how you're going about getting distribution.
Yeah, so we're currently in around 55 natural retail stores like Erewhon, Mother's Market, those sorts of premium stores. And
Yep.
we perform really well there, in the baked goods section, in the refrigerated dessert section. We usually outperform 9 out of 10 brands in our space naturally without promotions. Um,
Wow.
as we look to expand, obviously we're looking to get into Whole Foods, Sprouts, some of the like premium Kroger sets, nuggets up in Northern California. Um, we expect to continue to see that velocity. Um, but obviously it's a test, to see as we expand what happens. Because the what we do is not really an option. All of these ingredient profiles, those stores really don't have anything like what we're
Yeah.
making.
Yeah.
Sugar-free, gluten-free, grain-free, without seed oils. It is a, a disruptive option. So we're excited about that. But it means that we are pushing into a space that isn't necessarily always there.
Yeah.
And so that has been a challenge and is a challenge. So we are, you know, cautiously pushing into those spaces to make sure we make the right footprint
When
as
you
we.
say pushing into a space that isn't there, do you mean the consumers aren't necessarily there or the product doesn't have a place to live?
Yeah, both. I mean, the consumers are there. What we find is as soon as we're there, the consumers
Mhm.
decided we're selling. It's more that refrigerated dessert isn't necessarily a category at most
I,
of these.
I, I want to talk about that too, because it isn't, except for ice cream, which is totally different, right? That's frozen. And people don't know what to make of refrigerated desserts as much yet.
Yeah, and I have a theory about it. I don't know if it's just like something from my observations or as a consumer as well, but similar to the perfect snacks
Hmm.
lifestyle
Hmm.
or life cycle, you know, I believe that customers, when they see something refrigerated, it dings a bell that they're thinking, okay, it's perishable. It must have ingredients that are better for me.
Yep.
Because that's what it says to me as a consumer, as someone who cares about ingredients. And because when I see it, especially in the baked goods category, if I see it out on the table, I know it's going to be non-perishable. It's going to last for a really long time. So I know they have to use ingredients that I don't prefer
Yep.
as a consumer. That, if we always say, hey, freeze our product because we ship, or if they buy it from us, like we get moldy, we're super proud of it, because it's real
Yes.
food.
Yeah.
Um, Proud of our mold. And I think that even intuitively, customers know that. Like they
Yep.
just know it's an intuitive thing. So in Perfect Snacks, which, I love their brand, um, they had to truly like disrupt a category. They were the only ones
Yeah.
in the vegetable,
Yeah.
section, ready to eat, veggie section, with the juices. And I think that that was very disruptive. And I think the reason they've performed well, other than patience and their product tasting wonderful, is that customers identified with the fact that if it's refrigerated, that meant naturally that it would be real ingredients that they understood. And so part of that is the case. So at Erewhon, they've got like an entire section of refrigerated desserts.
Right.
There's a small section of refrigerated desserts. Fraser Farms like a small section, but there are some stores that do have like a little section. Sprouts is, to what I've heard, starting to talk about recalibrating their gluten-free bread section and pulling in some refrigerated desserts, which I think would be a really smart strategy for them. And we hope to be, like a part of that. But I think that because of the success that other stores have had in that, I think that brands, retailers will start to see that category grow. There's brands that don't have the same ingredient profile as mine, like a Rubicon, that are like maybe in a gluten-free or a vegan, plant-based, that are also in the refrigerated space that
Yeah.
have a lot there as well.
Are you concerned at all? I mean, I know Erewhon has a giant refrigerated dessert section and Whole Foods doesn't really. They've got some stuff up at the checkout, and then they've got tiny little spots where you don't really expect to see it and it feels confusing. Are you concerned about the limited availability of that space right now? Because that's the other thing that's tricky, right? There just isn't as much space.
Yeah, Whole Foods is so unique because it is truly the customer that is most optimized for velocity for my brand.
Yes.
Gluten-free, sugar-free, no seed oils, grain-free, keto. And every time I've shopped at Whole Foods, just as a consumer, I have almost every time overheard someone asking in the bakery section, asking this bakery manager for either a sugar-free baked good or a gluten-free baked good, and they don't have that option.
Yep.
And when we were at Fancy Foods, their global trend team came by for bakery, and I pointed it out. I was like, "Hey, it's just like asking because this is so unique,
Mhm.
like, an issue that's missing from your set." And they said the same thing. They said, "Yeah, it's something that's missing." And so I was like, "Well, we would love to provide that for you." So I would love to provide that option for them because, I think with the Amazon rollout through them, they shifted things. And I think that they're coming back to the local
Yeah.
foraging now that that transition shook out a little bit. And I'm hopeful that we can provide an option because those customers are still loyal to Whole Foods, but I think that there's a place for it.
Um, so you made a big leap and decided to start a brand, and that probably wasn't your plan initially. It doesn't sound like it. How do you feel about the decision, and what's the journey been like?
Yeah, I'm thrilled that I made this choice. You meet entrepreneurs who can't work for other people,
Mhm.
and I'm
Yep.
not one. I have no problem working within a team. I love being a leader as long as I'm growing constantly and becoming the most effective, ethical leader that I can be, making sure my team's able to grow into their roles. But I also love to be led by strong leadership. So for me, it's a great journey because I believe in the mission of helping families indulge
Yeah.
in maintain their health because it's about inclusivity, right? There's something about food and how we come together, and
Yep.
inclusivity is so important, especially with celebrations, and the idea that I can provide an option where someone feels a part of that celebration and isn't left out. The reviews and the letters I get, the emails I get from customers saying that they felt a part of the celebration because they were able to have cake or cupcakes or whatever part of our line that they chose. Because they had that, they keep it in their freezer and then they can go to Christmas or Hanukkah or birthday, whatever celebration it is. It's shocking to me that they pulled the part of our mission without me saying it, and
Yeah.
that it did for them, and it makes it really
That's really
resonate.
cool.
You know.
How did you learn all the things you needed to learn? Did you do an accelerator program? Did you just, it was a trial by fire? Did someone teach you?
Yeah, no, most of it's been trial by fire, and we're reaching out to other mentors, other founders. I do a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot. I always say it's kind of like building an airplane while it's in the air.
Yeah.
Like good
I
fun.
haven't heard anybody say that, but it's such a good analogy.
Or
It really
now I'm
is.
gonna learn about like freight and cold storage this week, and like label requirements and FDA requirements and taxation, and like we just got 2 contracts with the military bases out here, so it's like that's like a whole nother. We're just like, okay, now we're gonna learn about that. Like how much space is left in your brain.
Yes.
I did actually join an accelerator recently, about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Um, so I'm hopeful that that will help us accelerate the brand because we've been
Yeah.
bootstrapped to date, and I'm looking to open us a round for fundraising in the next couple of months so that we can take what we've built, really like a strong foundation, a small, strong foundation, really strategic, and accelerate it quickly, but ethically and like in the right way over the
Yeah.
next few.
Yeah. Um, what percentage of your business is DTC versus retail right now?
Yeah, so we're direct to consumer, retail, and also in-person events. So
Okay.
in-person events, we started in-person events, and then we stopped about 3 years ago just because there was only so much bandwidth. But I would say that was a big mistake I made. I should have continued with in-person events. But so this year we'll likely do um, 30% direct to consumer, um, 50% retail, and then the rest in
Nice.
events.
That's a good mix.
Yeah.
Nice
And
mix of things.
we are really focusing on direct to consumer just in the next few months, revamping it. Because last year we did 60% direct to consumer, 40% retail, we had a really nice surge in direct to consumer because of our affiliate program. Uh,
Hmm.
so we're hoping to beef that back up and kind of like recapture that marketplace.
What are your, first let's start with the challenges. What have been the biggest challenges you've kind of bumped into along the way?
Yeah. I would say cash flow has been an interesting journey for me to grapple with, and making sure that I'm keeping an eye on like growth and sustaining that growth and making sure I have enough cash flow to grow and meet the needs of that growth because of the, cycle, the cash cycle. So one of the reasons why we went back into in-person events, because the cash is closer to
Yep,
um, the need.
yep.
And it
And,
does other things for us as well. But
and what about the things that you've loved the most about it?
yeah, I mean, I love hearing back from customers about how the product actually makes their life easier. It's so rewarding. It makes everything so much better. Like, it doesn't matter what is difficult when we have people telling me that they had a good experience and that things were better for their families. It's great.
And what about, you said you're about to do a capital raise. What is that getting prepped for that like for you? Because we all know it's hard now, right? It used to be a few years ago, money was flowing around, and right now it's pretty tough environment. So what's that like for you?
It's been an inside job for me. Likely should have raised a couple of years ago, but I was personally not ready, not confident in just in the fundraising side of things. It's not my language, even though I'm strong on the company financials, the language of my company's financials, but because finance, that industry was not my world, and because I have perfectionist tendencies, it was something that I just kept putting off, and then the
Hmm.
market changed. So one of the reasons this accelerator is a good idea for me is it's their focus is getting our cohort ready for
Yeah,
fundraising. They don't give
yeah,
you an option. It's just this is the
yeah.
schedule and we're meeting and there's mentors, and it's really good for the structure because it doesn't give me the option to stick my head in the sand,
Hmm.
and put my focus on things that are not important
Yeah.
um, for that goal. And because as a founder you could be doing things that are not that all day long. I
A
could be doing
million, a million. You could do things all the,
that
yes.
forever.
Yep. Well,
And
and
I
I also think it gets you
know
focused on the financials, right? Right. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Say what you
no,
said again.
I could do it forever. I actually heard on a podcast once, and I don't remember who it was, but it was a great quote. And it was the CFO, I think, of some big company. And they said, you don't have to look at your financials, but if you're not looking at them, like your financials are still looking at you. Like, and it
Yeah.
was like, yeah, don't look away. Like you have to know what's happening under the hood.
And as much as it hurts sometimes, right? And it does.
Yeah.
It's painful. I think it's also, I I think that people who didn't raise when it was easy to raise in some ways are better poised to be successful in the long run because the requirements are, they may be overly crazy right now, but it's important to understand where the business is going to go. There was a lot of money being given to people who didn't have a plan, and
Yeah.
then they failed, and then everybody lost. So I really think that even though it's harder, it's great because it forces you to look at every aspect of the business. It forces you to collect data that supports the growth story of the business. And I don't think people had to do that as much a few years ago as they do now. And some of those people, many of those people aren't around.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think it for my personality type of feeling like I need to be very prepared before I take someone else's money because I
Yes.
did my own money and obviously time in this business. It actually suits me better because I
Totally.
want to feel like I am extremely prepared before I take on a large sum of money. And because there is a lot of risk when I take on large management positions in this company,
Of
because there's
course.
taking a risk, potentially giving them equity stake in the company, potentially take, that's, scaling from 55 to potentially 1,000 stores in the next couple of years. That is, I've seen companies in the fashion industry topple because they do it improperly, and that's been one of my reasons to go so strategically.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. What are you gonna, what's the point of your raise? Like, what do you need capital for?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to a lot of these CPG brands. We need to be able to um, optimize our inventory so that we're one able to keep up with demand, which is a
Mhm.
good thing to need, but we can't inventory the current stores we have, let alone go into a Whole Foods. Like I don't wouldn't be able to meet the needs of a Whole Foods or a
Yep,
Sprouts.
yep,
Also to drive up my margins by palletizing, increasing my margins like across the board, my blended margins. Also, I need additional staffing. Like we need to take on like an aligned brokerage firm to help us with, because they don't want to hear from one-off salespeople usually at
yeah,
these. They just don't have the time. And also we need to move to a third-party logistics center to optimize our shipping for direct to consumer. And we're not running any advertisements currently for direct to consumer. So I want to push back into my affiliate program, which I already have a lot of data on. And so I know that it's effective. Things like that, but all strategically placed um, so that we can, because there's a lot of foundation on what we've built. And so it's all data driven where we want to put the money.
yeah, that's great. And then you mentioned you want to get into more retail stores. What are your big goals for the brand? Where do you want to see it in 3 years, 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to be distributed nationwide but at like more like premium natural food
Hmm.
stores, like the Whole Foods, like the Sprouts, like Kroger's, Nuggets, places like that. Thrive Market. We're actually we had great meetings with some meal subscription companies
Hmm.
um, in at Fancy Foods, which I was really excited about because I think it's such an incredible alignment with
Agree.
their ingredient profile and also customers looking for convenience and they're shipping frozen. So it's a perfect alignment. So I'm hoping that that works out because it's it would be a really incredible growth step for us to be able to take that leap.
Yeah.
Um, and then we're also looking to expand our food service. So go into premium hotels,
Yep. Yep.
gyms, restaurants, work with US foods, hopefully, so that we can get into coffee shops, events, things like that, like large events.
Yes.
Like Disneyland, they don't have any options for their like diabetic customers, I mean, like on this level. And how many families do we know that are traveling to those kinds of parks that are, looking for
Yeah.
reductions in sugar?
Yeah. When you raise capital, what are you looking for in an investor?
Honestly, I mean, obviously the money is just one part of it, but somebody who is aligned in their values that can bring CPG experience, somebody who's understands what this kind of growth looks like for a company,
Mhm.
and not growth over everything, because
Right,
I
right, right, right.
is where a lot of that we've only just built like this tiny foundation, but the next stage is really where the real foundation needs to be built. And I'd love to work with some investors that understand and can guide me in some ways to
Yeah.
say, like, listen, I already paid the dummy tax on this. Like, you don't need to pay that dummy tax. Like, I paid the dummy tax on a lot of other things, like building this business, but I would be thrilled to learn places that they've learned those lessons, and I would love that.
I'm really glad to hear you saying that you don't want someone who's just growth over everything because I mean, those stories we all have heard too, how founders wind up with the wrong money, but wrong. And then they wind up either not liking what they're doing anymore or winding up leaving their own company. Like I'm happy to hear you saying that because I think it's really important to think about alignment when it comes to who's going to be your partner. I mean, basically they become a partner, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think at at later stages, it's intimidating to think that I heard one of the mentors that through the accelerator, they were talking about how the founder should just basically always be fundraising, and I was just like, oh God, like I was like, oh my God, no, but I was like, okay, but I think it is probably true, just hopefully it just gets easier that you just it becomes a thing that you're just
Used to doing. Yeah, it
doing.
becomes what you do. It's true. It just becomes another part of your job. But I think getting it right at the beginning and building a really strong foundation and a really data-driven case for growth, I think those are the right things to do. And then getting connected to the right people versus the wrong people obviously really matters.
Yeah, and maybe hopefully the first one's the hardest one because then
I'm
I will.
sure, of course, and I've heard women founders talk about how different it is to be a woman founder than it is to go in, because you're mostly, even though it's changing, you still are a lot largely raising money with companies that are run by men. I mean, that's just the way it is still. And so I think that that's an interesting thing to have to think about as a woman founder, and a lot of other people don't have to think about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think maybe with the market changing, I'm hopeful that, well, nepotism is alive and well, obviously, in every industry.
Agreed.
And I don't would never pretend that I haven't had privileges in my life because of, where I
Yep.
started, which obviously I'll optimize, but never not acknowledging them. But it's interesting because I think in some ways the way the market changed, because the women founders I know tend to operate in their brains like me, being perfectionists
Mhm.
and overly prepared. It maybe that will accelerate women getting funding,
Yeah.
and I'm
So,
for
yeah.
my founders.
Yes. Yes.
We're
Um,
used to being the ones over prepared.
yeah, totally. Have to be, right? You have no choice. It's the only
Yeah.
way to survive. So I think that that's an interesting thing. And also theoretically should make those founders more successful in the end, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I
I
hope
hope that
so.
you're right about that. Well, I really appreciate your time. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I also want to just ask you, like, I always ask people to share, like, what are the most important lessons you learned along the way that you could share with other founders who are listening to this?
Yeah. Never be afraid to pivot. If things aren't working, I think that's really critical as a founder. Actually really listening to your customers, not just a one-off customer, but if you're hearing feedback about things, then it's important that you let it like soak into your brand and like consider making a change. Um,
Do
and
you have any examples of any of those things?
Yeah, I mean, we were shipping in like plastic like boxes for a
Yep.
while, and I had it in my mind that it was keeping the muffins like safer. They were already flow wrapped, and I I mean, we want to be socially conscious, all of these things, and we were doing it in all these other ways. But I had in my mind that the muffins would get like crushed or whatever. And I had a few customers said something. And then I had another customer email me and say, like, hey, like, just can you just not ship my stuff in the plastic? Like, she like said, she was like, I don't mind if they get crushed. Like, I'm really trying to be conscious. So I was like, okay, sure. So I did. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, I need to like just shake. I just had it in my mind. This was our SOP. And then I just stopped and I started putting like craft paper. I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me. Like, duh. And I did. And then I just like shifted all of the stuff. And I was like, what's wrong with you? And I did. And I was like, okay. And it was great. It actually was more secure. I don't know. But it was just one of those things where I was like, don't be afraid to like just shake the whole thing up. Like, just to
Yeah.
like, just because you did it that way in the very beginning when you didn't know what you were doing.
Yep. 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 Any others?
Yeah. I think obviously I'm not a great example at this, but trying to balance things is important. Especially when you're a solo founder. Um,
Mhm.
and one of the ways that I think this industry is really different from other industries is reaching out to other founders is an option. So if I'm struggling with something, I see it all the time with other brands that people reach out to each other. And I found that to be really incredible. That never would have happened in the fashion industry. And so it's really uplifting. And I hear from other founders how it sometimes is the only thing that keeps them going when we have a catastrophe. Because
Yep.
sometimes you have a catastrophe that could topple your entire brand, a packaging issue,
Yep.
quality control issue, something like that. It's happened to all of us. And if you reach out to your community, you won't feel so alone. Or if you think you're the only one who's in the red, like it's like you think you're the only one, it's I'm like, wait, what? All of these CPG brands are not making money. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in the black, but mostly only because I don't pay myself. It's
Yep.
like, yeah,
Yep.
actually, it's not real life. So I think but my unit economics are incredibly strong. So it's an interesting thing, but you wouldn't know that until you start talking to people. And you
Yeah.
just
And
think, am I
I
doing
think
something wrong?
Yeah. And then I think you almost feel like I can't say it because what if I sound like I don't know what I'm doing, which no one knows what they're doing, by the way. And
Yeah.
it's the whole reason I started this podcast because I was talking to so many founders during COVID that were just telling me these stories, like when we were talking about creative and marketing and putting together investor decks, and they were so stressed and felt so wildly alone. And I was like, wait, there are so many people like this. They need to hear that there are other people like this. And so I started the podcast to start to share the stories because I really thought it would be useful for people. And I've heard the same thing that you just said about this community of founders. It is the most open, helpful community of all the industries I've spoken with. And I think it's really nice because it's hard, and having sounding boards and having the ability to say, I don't know if this is a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And then hearing 20 people say, I already went through that. That's not a dumb question, is amazing.
Incredible. That startup CPG like resource, you
Yes.
can find answers to almost any question.
Yep. Yep.
Founder can just say like, oh, hey, you can give me a call. They've never met you. I will say like, they could be in my exact vertical. I don't care. Like there's room for everybody.
Yep.
It's wild. Like, you ask a question and you will get 15, 20 answers on your question. Or if you just search, you can find so many answers, just very niche questions, like
Yeah.
really weirdly niche questions.
I think it's really cool also. And I think it's unusual. I don't think a lot of industries are like that. And certainly big CPG is not like that.
No, I would imagine they're not. I know
Yeah.
fashion was certainly not like that.
Definitely not. Yeah, so that's interesting. Anything else you want to share, or do you want to talk a little? Do you want to talk a little bit about your products, because we didn't talk that much about that. I mean, I know you make cupcakes, and talk just a little bit more about what you're doing and how much you've had to innovate.
Yeah, yeah. So we use all real food ingredients. So butter is our base, our healthy fat. We love healthy fats. So no seed oils is a big thing for us. No polyunsaturated fats. So we use butter, avocado oil in our products. We're all gluten-free, grain-free, sugar-free, and it's all keto friendly, but it tastes delicious. And we don't use artificial preservatives, so people keep our products in the freezer. We sell into the grocery stores cupcakes, already frosted cupcakes, our loaf cakes, our 1 pound loaf cakes, delicious flavors like cinnamon pecan crumb, death by chocolate, strawberries and
Yeah.
cream, vanilla dream, which is made with real vanilla. It tastes like real vanilla cake, not like that weird synthetic cake. And then we also sell a ready-to-use frosting pouch. I should have brought one up here. We made with real butter. It's only 5 ingredients. It's butter, Ceylon cinnamon, Redmond real salt, Lakanto powdered monk fruit sweetener, and then organic vanilla. So it's like the most simple recipe, but it tastes so delicious, like real frosting that you'd make at home. And it's sugar-free. It's zero net carbs. People use it in their coffee. They put it on our baked goods.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, really delicious, and you really wouldn't even know it's sugar-free. It's a great gateway gateway to sugar-free. So yeah, the products are really taste like real
Yeah.
dessert. You don't know you're missing out on all the junk in them.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I will put a link in the blog post that I write to your website so
Yeah,
that people can go visit and see what you're doing and maybe give it a try.
absolutely. It was so great to chat with you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.